All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Local Agency Traffic Safety Academy. My name is Anthony Chamont, consultant to District 7 and 4 from Tyndall Oliver. I am showing you here the notice that everyone that is here received, a couple of important links that are there that I always like to remind everyone of. Dennis's email is here. He is the Safety Academy coordinator. You have a link to the Tampa Bay Traffic Safety webpage. This is the location where the webinar will be posted at the end of the webinar, the PowerPoint slides, as well as the actual recording of the webinar will be on there. You've got a link for registering, or link to log in, so everybody that's right now is on there. And there's also a link if you no longer wish to receive notices from GoToWebinar for whatever reason. Those are there as well. When you follow the link to our webpage, we have the upcoming webinars. We're doing some minor tweaks to the webpage. We used to have the completed webinars, listed at the top, but now when you get to the webpage, it shows you today's webinars at the top. This will be moved down to the bottom. We're making some changes. You can see the upcoming webinars on here. The completed webinars for 2017 are here. When you scroll down, this is an area that's going to go through some changes pretty soon as well, because our list is getting fairly long. We're going to group by date and maybe figure out a way of doing them by category as well to make things a little bit easier to find on here. But this is the location where the videos are. Last time's webinar on Modern Roundabout by Ken Sides is here. Down at the bottom of this page, there is the PDF request forms for 2017. If you notice on your webinar little pod, there are also handouts on there. Download them either from the webpage or directly from GoToWebinar. With that, I'll hand it over to Dennis for the webinar intro and speaker introduction.
Anthony, thank you. I appreciate it. Good morning. This is Dennis Falloon, the District 7 Safety Academy Coordinator and Consultant, and I'd like to welcome you to the 8th District 7 Safety Academy webinar for 2017. Today's safety topic will be the 2016 Florida Greenbook by Mary Ann Coos, and she's a certified public manager and the special projects coordinator at FDOT headquarters in roadway design in Tallahassee, Florida. She also has 30 years of experience in designing active transportation corridors, and she is the primary author of the Florida Greenbook, is in partnership with the Florida Greenbook Advisory Committee and its technical advisors. And she also serves as a board member of the Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals, leading the Education Committee. With that, I want to kind of give you an intro to the Academy. And as you know, this is the District 7 Agency Traffic Safety Academy. And the purpose of it is to provide information on safety-related issues to enhance your local safety programs in your area. This is the 5th year of the District 7 Safety Academy, started for this year in January 18th, 2017. And they usually start around 10 a.m. and end by noon, so it's a 2-hour window. They are supposed to run till December 13th, and a minimum of 1 hour, but no more than 2 hours. There is also on here you will see where you need to register, and Anthony highlighted that on the Safety Academy webpage, and also the webpage where it has a list of those previous webinars that have been given and where they were posted. On this is the workshop series. As I said, today is 2016 Florida Greenbook, which highlights those webinars that are completed and those that we have scheduled today out to December 13th. So we're actually having 17 webinars for the year. Also, this webinar will be submitted for credit for planners for AICP credit. And also, if you are a professional engineer, you can get your PDHs by filling out a form out on the webpage, or you can go to this link here and submit it to Larry Hagan, and he'll send you a certificate. And then these are my information. If you have any questions, need assistance, just contact me, and I'll be glad to take care of you. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Ann.
Great. Okay, thank you. Are you going to make me the presenter?
Yes, I'll send you the request, but you wanted to ask about the current version, so let's send that poll out real quick to the audience while we do the transfer in the background. Make presenter, yes. So the Greenbook is revised every few years. What is the current version of the Greenbook? Making sure everybody's paying attention here. Everybody's awake. We'll give folks a few minutes to see. As a panelist, Marianne, I believe you can see the answers in the little chat pod that you've probably minimized, but I will tell you the results in a second here.
Okay. Oh, I do see it. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, you see them live as they're coming through. The little kind of orange right-facing arrow minimizes that if it gets in, and if that pod gets in the way of your presentation while you're presenting. Okay. So we've got another few seconds here. We've got 70% of the audience has chimed in. Let's close this out and share the results with everyone. Looks like 20% of our audience believes the 2013 is the most recent. 11% says the 2014. 18% says 2015. The lion's share, 44%, 2016, and 7% 2017. And you know, so that's where we're at, Marianne.
Well, the majority wins. So
the majority, yeah.
So one of the things is I know it's 2017 and we just released the 2016 Florida Greenbook, but rulemaking takes about a year and a half. And although we started rulemaking in 2016, we did not finish until June. And so we try to get the best guess we can for what year we're going to publish. But the most current version is the 2016. So, and our previous version was our previous version was the 2013, and there wasn't a 14 or a 15. We don't publish every year, and the next version will actually be a 2018. We will skip 2017.
On your end, Marianne, you'll have to accept sharing the screen.
Okay, let me see I'm not. I think your little thing is. It must be.
There we go.
I'll resend it to you.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, now we can see your screen. You're good.
Okay, so. Okay, and let me minimize the tool and push that over to the side. And are you guys still seeing the tool, or is that you're not seeing it, right?
The audience does not see the tool, so it is not in the way.
That is great. Okay. Well, thanks, everybody, and thanks for participating in the poll. There's going to be a couple more poll questions that we'll send to you throughout. And the other thing is that a lot of these slides are pretty detailed. And so if you have a question about a particular slide that I'm on, please just send a chat to Anthony, and he'll get those questions to me, and we'll try to address them as they arise. And then at the end, we'll have some time just for general questions related to the Florida Greenbook. And just for timing, there are 70 slides. The majority of them are numbered to give you an idea of where we are. And I'm thinking that it will take us about an hour and 5 minutes to go through the slides, and then we'll have still time for questions and hopefully be able to get you out. Our goal will be by 11:30. And around 10:30, I'm going to be joined by Becky Barber, and she's actually going to be helping me with some slides later in the presentation about where to access data. Okay, so a little overview for you all. I'm very visual, and so in developing the presentation, I wanted to show you kind of a goal for the kind of streets that we could be building. And in looking back through DOT's historical photo archives, I was looking for photos, but they never ever showed people, and they always just showed like a bulldozer and a strip of dirt through an orange grove. And so I found this particular postcard from Lincoln Road in Miami, This is, I think, from the 30s, and you can just see that this is, kind of shows the streets that we'd like to build, a great place to be, beautiful buildings, on-street parking, pedestrians, beautiful wide sidewalk, and well-maintained landscaping. So I thought this could be our vision of what we're trying to, where we're trying to go. So the purpose of the Florida Greenbook, it's our responsibility to write the Greenbook is actually established through statute, and the purpose is to provide uniform minimum standards and criteria. So you can always do better, but you at least have to do what's in the Greenbook. And we cover design, construction, and maintenance. And it applies to all streets, roads, highways, bridges, sidewalks, curbs, curb ramps, crosswalks, bicycle facilities, underpasses, and overpasses traveled by the public. And primarily this applies to local roads, and we'll get into a little bit more details on where you might use State Highway System criteria, the PPM, Plans Preparation Manual, on a local road. It usually applies to funding. The Greenbook, the Florida Greenbook, it's developed by a 28-member advisory committee, plus we have a lot of technical advisors, either from local governments or from other staff here at the Florida DOT. And we have, it's a pretty diverse group, and we work on a consensus basis. And each year, the Greenbook Committee kind of identifies, there's 20 chapters in the Greenbook as to where they would like to work, what needs updating, and then they work through subcommittee throughout the year to develop changes that are then presented to the entire Greenbook Committee when we meet each spring, usually someplace in Central Florida. So there is, it's really kind of stacked towards non-DOT representation. So there are 2 professional engineers from each district that represent a rural and an urban local government. Then there is a consulting engineer, and then there's DOT's district design engineer. And together that makes our 28-member committee. In thinking about our work plan for the Florida Greenbook and the reason for all the changes that we've made in the last few years in both the 2013 and now in the 2016, we were looking back, and I was looking through the Greenbook, and Chapter 3, which is geometric design, had not been changed in a very, very long time. And mostly because it's got so many detailed figures and tables, and nobody was really demanding that we update it. But in 1995, Federal Highway released their manual flexibility in highway design, and at this time is when ICE-T, which created, all the new funding for bike and ped facilities and better management of stormwater and preservation of historic structures came into play. And so when I was reading in the Flexibility in Highway Design manual, there was this very important part that Congress emphasized a design for new construction, reconstruction, or rehabilitation of a highway in the National Highway System. And it may take into account the constructed and natural environment, environmental, scenic, aesthetic, historic, community, and preservation impacts of the highway activity, and also access for other modes of transportation. So this is when we first really started focusing on providing access for cyclists and pedestrians. And if anybody wants to, I actually am lucky enough to have a paper copy of this, but if anybody wanted to download this and look at this manual, it's actually has a lot of wonderful things in here for guiding us in how we develop our future design criteria. And the one thing they kept on saying is there's a lot of flexibility in our design criteria, but maybe we weren't really listening. And then around early 2015, FHWA announced that they were going to begin the process of adopting the 2011 AASHTO Greenbook. And, you know, the previous version that they had adopted was the 2004. So there had been a lot of, AASHTO's kind of slow moving, and Federal Highway also is. And so there had been a lot of changes in philosophy about how we design streets and highways. And as Federal Highway was saying, we're now going to adopt the AASHTO Greenbook, we were looking through the Florida Greenbook and trying to find the appropriate references for many of the things that were requiring you to do, and found that it was sometimes hard to find the reference, or actually there had been changes between 2004 and 2011. And if we were going to go ahead and start updating Chapter 3, Geometric Design, we really needed to be updating it to what would be the most current version of AASHTO. So even though Federal Highway had not yet adopted the AASHTO Greenbook, we started writing the Florida Greenbook to be consistent with 2011 AASHTO, if that makes any sense. The other thing, since this is the Safety Academy, I had just wanted to impress upon you that in the Greenbook, as we develop our work plan for the coming year, that we're really looking at safety, and where are the areas that we can develop design criteria and guidance that will most improve highway safety by leading to safer behavior and roadways designed more for all the users who need to use them. And so in the Greenbook, we tend to focus, and I think you're going to be able to see my mouse, we're focusing on speeding. Can't really do too much about aggressive, but speeding we've been working on pedestrian and bicycle crashes, intersection crashes, and then lane departure crashes. And you can see that those are the most significant types of crashes that occur on Florida's highway system. And so this is crash data from 2011 through 2015. You can find this in the 2016 Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which is on FDOT's Safety Office webpage. And if you haven't looked at the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, it is very interesting, it's very graphic, and contains a ton of information. So there was two areas that I wanted to bring your attention. In safety, there's, depending on who you talk to, multiple E's. In our safety plan, we have 5 E's. We have engineering, enforcement, education, I think encouragement, and then traffic records. And so the two that I thought were most appropriate for designers was engineering, of course. So we want to identify, develop, and deploy engineering solutions and best practices that encourage safe driving. So, and then to incorporate policies and practices into roadway design, construction, operations, and maintenance. And if you remember, this is exactly what the Greenbook does, is it develops criteria and policies for these activities. And then the last bullet was ensure infrastructure design allows for safe and efficient access for first responders. And I thought when I was reading this, wow, it's 2016, but it's still a little car-centric. So I had to put up my picture of this man walking his dog, and the fact that we need to think about more than just the words in the plan. And so up here, for encourage safe driving behavior, I think we need safe travel behavior, and that would include everyone. And then down here, instead of just access for first responders, I think everyone wants safe and efficient access. Pedestrians want to be able to cross the street. People driving trucks want to be able to access the businesses that they're delivering goods to. And so we need to think about this in the bigger picture and always remember that transportation really needs to serve a multiple variety of users. For the traffic records and information systems, the big thing here was, and I like data to influence our decisions. And so when we're developing changes for the Greenbook, we really try to research what are the things that are causing problems, what are the things that are working, and make sure that we're putting those things that are working as a tool into the Greenbook. So for the traffic records and information systems, this 5th E, in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, the bullets are to develop, maintain, and enhance quality traffic records, to develop a schematic approach for identifying locations and behaviors leading to crashes, and to promote the collection, analysis, and distribution of quality crash data. And these particular guys are the Winter Park Police Department officers on Park Avenue at one of Winter Park's street festivals. But there's, if you're in an airport or any place where there's a large public gathering of people, it's a pretty sure thing that you're going to see cops on bike, first responders on bike, and it's just a wonderful thing because they can move through crowds and often arrive at situations where they're needed much more quickly than traditional law enforcement in a car. So I really thought these guys were a good example of where we're headed for great crash records and availability of data. The other thing is that as law enforcement spends more time as a cyclist or a pedestrian, they're better understanding of the problems maybe that that cyclists and pedestrians might face, and so I think we're getting a lot better crash data and data that we can use to then develop countermeasures. So for complete streets is a big thing in Florida right now. For those of you who have been following the DOT's work, we are going to be releasing our FDOT design manual, which uses a series of context zones to then have associated design criteria. But, with the state highway system, FDOT kind of gets to decide what's going to happen on these roads, and a lot of our design criteria is developed and is utilized by DOT. But for local roads, we've got 67 counties and more than 200 cities, and it would be impossible for everyone to agree on what a context zone would be for a particular street and how it should be designed. And so for the Greenbook, we've taken more of the perspective that we want to make sure that the Greenbook allows every local government to build the kind of street that fits its community. And so our values would be to be economically prosperous and socially equitable, environmentally sustainable, and that these should be the goals of our public infrastructure. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but they are doing some work replacing our generator outside the building, and I'm hoping it won't be too distracting. So let me know if it is, and we'll figure something else out, okay? So for the Florida Greenbook, this is what it looks like. It's historically always been green. I just thought, okay, maybe it's time to get rid of trying to find different kinds of green colors, and using our standard DOT format for labeling our manuals. I think maybe for the 2018 we'll come up with something a little more interesting. But it's now posted on the webpage, and you guys are going to get the handouts if you don't already have them. And where you can get them is going to be in, I think, a chat. And in the handouts, there should be, if you look at them electronically, there will be a lot of hot links, and that will direct you to places. So the Greenbook would be right at this DOT, FDOT.gov roadway hot link, and the Greenbook has its own webpage. So the Greenbook became effective June 19th, 2017, even though it is the 2016 Florida Greenbook. Where we are with this effective date, what the expectation is that any project that you're starting after June 19th should, of course, use the 2016 Florida Greenbook design criteria. And I think when you learn more about it, you're going to realize that you want to, because it gives you a lot more flexibility than you might have had in the past. For projects that are underway, the local government can make the decision as to whether or not they want to use the 2013 Greenbook or the 2016 Greenbook. But again, if you look at the 2016 Greenbook, it is going to give you a lot more flexibility in designing the kind of roadways that you'd like. The next question is always to ask yourself, is my project on or off the state highway system? And the first part is so the Greenbook is always intended for use on all streets and highways off the state highway system. So any place where the public is invited to travel off the state highway system. Unless you're using federal funds and you trigger a threshold for the use of higher design criteria. So if your project would be on the national highway system, there are some local roads that actually are on the national highway system. So when you're starting a project, make sure that you have verified with your district DOT office what the classification of the roadway is. If your project has a construction value of greater than or equal to 10 million, or if it includes a vehicular bridge, a pedestrian bridge over a roadway, a pedestrian bridge over a river would not require the use of the PPM, or certain box culverts. As box culverts get larger in size, it might trigger the use of the PPM. So if you meet those three criteria, then you would use FDOT's Plans Preparation Manual and the design standards. And the reason for that is because Federal Highway reviews the PPM and the design standards, and so they sign off on them as appropriate design criteria for any federally funded projects. They don't review the Florida Greenbook. To help a little bit in the LAT manual, because it was kind of confusing as to what design criteria to follow, and some people didn't believe there was design criteria they needed to follow. So we worked with the LAP program, the local agency program, and consolidated a lot of narrative direction into this one table. And I know you won't be able to read this table, but if you followed the hot link and you went to table 3.1 in the LAT manual, you would see this tier, just like I showed for you in the previous slide, of at what point you use the Florida Greenbook versus FDOT's Plans Preparation Manual. And then in 2018, we'll switch this so that you would use the FDOT Design Manual that will replace the Plans Preparation Manual. You know that you've landed in the right spot when you see this. This is the 2017 PPM. And this, again, is the 2016 Greenbook. Okay? So those are your most current design criteria at the time. So major changes in the 2016 Greenbook. There's 20 chapters, and we changed more than half of them. So planning, geometric design, roadside design, lighting, rail highway crossings, pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, work zone safety, public transit, traffic calming, residential street design, bridges and other structures, and signing and marking. These were the major changes for 2016. And so it's important for you to just spend a little bit of time researching this and reviewing this, especially if you are involved in a lighting, rail, pedestrian, or bicycle facility project. Those had the most substantial changes related to design criteria and have a lot of new shall conditions, actually. So the 2016 Florida Greenbook, one of the things, I gave a presentation at Design Expo 2 years ago, and I've been traveling around the state with the LAP program, and we've been giving presentations kind of on an overview of the changes, all the chapters that I just showed you. That presentation is posted on our website, and you can just go there and you can, actually I took this clip before the 2016 became final, but these changes are still there, and you would just be able to go up here and see the summary of major changes and just become familiar with that. It's like a Cliff Notes version, okay? The big thing that I wanted to talk with you about today are the shalls and shoulds. There are over 250 shall conditions in the Florida Greenbook, and we spent, the Greenbook subcommittee for Chapter 3, spent one subcommittee meeting, about an hour and a half, wrestling with whether or not we should Becky's joining me now if you hear her coming in. So wrestling with, shall we change the Greenbook to more active language, convert all the shalls to musts, and in an hour and a half we couldn't really resolve it, and then one of our members researched federal highways criteria, and their manual on plain language and shall and must and everything was 124 pages long. So at that point we decided that this wasn't a productive use of our time because they mean the same. So shall, must mean the same. For should, it's an advisory condition. It's considered to denote advisable usage. It's recommended, but it's not mandatory. So for all the shoulds, you really should follow the criteria for shoulds, and you should have a good reason for when you can't, okay? And that's going to get into your design documentation. So these are the elements. These are just examples of some of the areas that have shall conditions. So design speed, stopping and passing sight distance, lane width, cross slope, shoulders, medians, shielding, rail crossings, sidewalks, bike lanes, and shared use paths, and then design exceptions. And yeah, there are actually shall conditions for sidewalks, bike lanes, and shared use paths. And so, you know, it's not one of AASHTO's controlling elements, Federal Highways controlling elements, but it is important criteria for the Greenbook. So for new construction or 3R, so find the right chapter. New construction and reconstruction projects, you're going to be looking at geometric design, roadside design, lighting, rail highway crossings, pedestrian and bike facilities, transit, and drainage. And then for maintenance and resurfacing, be thoughtful and read the maintenance and resurfacing chapter. That's chapter 10. And also be aware of the fact that maintenance and resurfacing activities often trigger compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And for the criteria then for improving pedestrian and bicycle facilities, you'll find all that in chapters 8 and 9. And then we've been working on our design exceptions chapter. That's chapter 14. And we've added the title. The title is revised to Design Exceptions and Variations. And you'll see that in our 2018 edition. But, you know, an exception is going to be whether, you know, if your inability to meet the design criteria is a controlling element as an exception. And then a variation is your inability to meet any other shall condition that is within the Florida Greenbook. So for Greenbook definition of terms, a lot of things are measured from different places, and where you measure from and your understanding of the terminology can affect whether or not this is going to impact your design. And as two examples, I just wanted to make you aware of the fact that in the beginning of the Florida Greenbook, we have a whole section, it's in the introduction, with definitions of terms. And so for a roadway, you're going to, a roadway is that portion of a street or highway, including shoulders, for vehicular use. And remember, bicycles are considered to be vehicles in Florida. And so, and a traveled way is the portion of the roadway for the movement of vehicles exclusive of shoulders, berms, sidewalks, and parking lanes. So sometimes when we're measuring offsets, clear zone, separation between the roadway and the shared use path, it's important to know the difference between these two terms, that the traveled way excludes the shoulder. For design speed, so you should really, we've worked a lot on design speed, a lot of changes here, and you really need to consider the anticipated operating speed, the topography, the land use, bicycle and pedestrian traffic, and the functional classification. The big thing is the design speed shall not be less than the posted speed. This is really, really important. And it needs to be compatible with terrain, local development, safety, and funding. And it should be consistent over a given section of street or highway. You know, drivers should be able to expect and have advance notice of changes in speed. The recommended values, they're given in table 3.1. And so you'll see, what you'll see here is that our design speeds now have a range, and that the low end of the range is a lot lower than what it used to be. And so just as an example, on urban arterials, from 30 to 60, all urban arterials, regardless of volume of traffic, 30 to 60 miles an hour. Collectors, urban collectors, 30 to 50 miles an hour. And local urban roads, 20 to 30 miles an hour. And these lower design speeds, I think, will help you all in accomplishing some of your goals of creating complete streets, and also addressing the relationship of excessive speed with increased severity of traffic crashes. So, and if you notice, there's little notes. I don't know if you can see it, but there's little, like here, those superscripts, the numbers. Subscripts will do above. Superscripts. So anyway, it's important to read these notes. And so just as an example, I blew up urban arterial, and note 3, lower speeds apply to central business districts and in more developed areas, while higher speeds are more applicable to outlying and developing areas. So when we say urban and rural, we're not talking about flush shoulder and curb and gutter. We're talking about urban environment and rural environment. And one of the ways that can help you define that is the Florida Greenbook is now requiring you to use the FHWA urban boundary maps that we publish as a tool for defining when you need to be providing bike and ped facilities. And so pretty sure I have a link to those maps just a little bit later. So,
Marianne, on design speeds, there's a question in the chat asking about the posted versus design speed. Any segments of the roadway system where the posted speed is currently greater than the design speed, what's going to happen to those? Because that's changing to a shall condition, it sounds like.
Well, you know, that has always actually been in the Greenbook. It's been in there for a long, long time. And so if you have that situation, and especially if you're actively involved on working on a road like that, on a road where the design speed and the posted speed are not harmonized, then you need to address that and identify what the appropriate posted speed should be, or resolve the limitations that cause the design speed to be in conflict with the posted speed. Like it might be sight distance, or a curve, or a clear zone, or something like that, but those need to be harmonized, and that is really important. This mindset where, oh, I'm going to design it to what I can afford, and then I'm going to post it to what people drive, is not appropriate. And that's particularly what we were wanting to address and make designers very aware of, and make the managing agency very aware of that also. So just, you know, because that can lead to crashes. So does that help answer that question? Hopefully.
I think so.
Okay. Go back. I think we were right here on note 4. Another example is for the local urban streets for all volumes of traffic, with this new design speed range of 20 to 30 miles an hour. So for note 4, since the function of urban local streets is to provide access to adjacent property, all design elements should be consistent with the character of activity on and adjacent to the street, and should encourage speeds generally not exceeding 30 miles an hour. So we're really trying to guide the designer to think about the land use adjacent to the street and design the street to support that land use. And by giving you these lower design speeds that might, especially like if you're in a central business district with a lot of activity and small blocks, you know, we want really to support that access to those businesses. Or, you know, lots of places where people might need to cross, and getting the speeds down to the point where those crossings can be safer. There's a lot of research that shows that as drivers drive slower, they're more inclined to yield to pedestrians. And because we have such a large number of pedestrian crashes, we want to, again, design streets that help to make our roadways safer for all. Sight distance. So sight distance is an area that we have changed. So we want to have a safe stopping and passing sight distance. And the sight distance is determined by the vehicle speed, the driver's total reaction time, the characteristics and condition of the vehicle, the friction capabilities, the vertical and horizontal alignment. And so we revised these tables 3.3 and 3.4, and I'll show them to you. One of the things is, you know, if I was able to talk with you all and you were able to answer me out loud, we would talk about this picture. And there's something missing in this picture, and if you can, just look at it for a second and tell me and think about what's missing that might make this safer. And if you're with people in a room, talk about that for a second. And I'll tell you in just a second, chance to look at it a little bit. So one of the things is this is a marked pedestrian crossing, but the car on the outside is so, and I'm taking this picture as we're approaching, and I'm the passenger, not the driver. So you can see that the drivers for us in the left lane, our view would have been blocked of anyone who was beginning to cross from the outside towards the inside of the circle. And it's because that silver car is so close to the crosswalk that it's in our line of sight as we're approaching, and that the time we would need to prepare to stop for that pedestrian crossing. So what would help this particular intersection would be an advance, since this is a kind of a yield condition crossing, the advanced diamonds, shark teeth set appropriately far enough back so that the silver car isn't blocking the other car's forward sight distance. So just some things, you know, that we think about, and I think the biggest lesson here is that just because you go to someplace that's really great, and I think St. Armand Circle is great, there's tons of pedestrian activity, and because people know and expect pedestrians, it works. But just because you see something done in a certain way, even if it's brand new, never assume it's the best way to do something, and always think for yourself and go back and review the design criteria and review some of the research and make sure that you're doing what is the best practice, okay? And that is the type of stuff that we're trying to put into the Florida Greenbook. So in our pedestrian chapter, we actually have some illustrations of crosswalks with advanced yield and stop lines to encourage you to use them. So for stopping sight distance, the big thing here is that it used to be calculated at 0.5 feet was the object height, and we've revised that to 2 feet. And that has allowed the stopping sight distance to be a little shorter. Actually, it didn't become a lot shorter, but it's a little shorter. But just remember that this object height has changed. And, you know, that gets back into, you know, your design speed and posted speed. And then for passing sight distance, there was always two ways that this was being shown. The Florida Greenbook was using the 2004 AASHTO Greenbook calculations, and the MUTCD was using a different way of describing these minimum passing sight distances. The 2011 AASHTO Greenbook adopted the MUTCD method, and we have since also adopted that method. And so these values, like at 45 miles an hour, I wonder, did I make a thing for that? So we've got the 3.5 feet object height. And so at 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, that minimum passing sight distance used to be over 1,000 feet, and now it's 700 feet. So make sure that when you're designing your project, you are going back and looking at these revised values and making sure that you're meeting those, but it actually is easier to meet them. For pavement lane width, minimum lane widths for travel, speed change, turn, and passing lanes are in table 3.10. The most important part is that one of the goals of the Florida Greenbook, and even the Florida DOT too, is to be more efficient with the asphalt we already have and be working within our existing rights-of-way and how do we better use that space. And so for the Florida DOT, I used to work in District 3 in Chipley, and we went about kind of restriping a lot of our roadways, our curb and gutter roadways, so that we could create wider outside lanes. We were building 11-foot inside lanes, and all the extra space went into the outside. And this is Thomasville Road in Tallahassee. And you can see here, just with that huge bus in there, how comfortably it fits in that outside lane, because that is a 14 or maybe even a 15-foot wide lane. And so one of the things now that we've put into both the Florida Greenbook and is now in the 2011 AASHTO Greenbook is based upon this experience. We've been doing this for like 15 years now, that adjusting lane width to plop all that extra width in the outside lane, even if you can't build a bike lane, helps the bicyclist. It also helps the pedestrian. It helps turning vehicles. It helps with managing stormwater because there's more available lane width if water is collecting around a drain. There's just a ton of research that actually roadways striped this way have less crashes than a roadway that would be striped in the traditional 12-12 pattern. So that was the topic of kind of adjusting existing lanes. And then what you'll see now in the Florida Greenbook is we have adopted narrower lanes as a standard. We used to pretty much always just say 12, 12, 12, everything is 12. And now we've got 12s and 11s and 10s and even, if you look down here on low volume roads, 9s. And this is why I'm saying that if you're in the midst of designing a project, you might want to embrace this 2016 Florida Greenbook, even though you've started design, because it allows you to make narrow lanes actually now are compliant and meet design criteria. Just as some examples, one of the ones is these urban collectors. 11 foot is the standard lane width. And of course, we've got our superscripts again. And I kind of blew up that section just so you could read it, because I hate being in a presentation where somebody shows a bunch of slides and I can't read anything on the slide. And so if we go back and we look at those urban 11-foot collector lanes, and now if we look at our notes, so note 2 is industrial areas and where truck volumes are significant, 12-foot lanes should be provided, but may be reduced to 11 where right-of-way is severely limited. So if you've got a lot of large vehicles, we really expect you to provide 12-foot lanes. You saw how nice that big bus fit in that nice wide lane. But 11-foot is okay if you don't have the right-of-way. And so hopefully by saying this, we're relieving you of the responsibility of having to write an exception or a variation due to lane width. And then, but look again, so if we look at note 3, again, we're in constrained areas where truck and bus volumes are low and speeds are less than 35 miles an hour. 10-foot lanes may be used. So again, we're writing into the criteria that if you meet these conditions, you can use 10-foot lanes and you wouldn't have to write a design exception or variation. The thing here, as I'm looking at this, we're always seeing places that we need to improve. And whoever asked the question about design versus posted speed is probably going, what does she mean? And so this is kind of an area that we probably need to do a better job. I need to do a better job of defining if I meant design speed or posted speed. But I'm pretty sure in this situation, we were talking about posted speed. Okay, so take it as posted speed, just write it in in your own little personal copies of the Greenbook. So traveled way cross slope, let's see, how are we doing on time? I think we're doing okay. So Becky's got her super Fitbit on that's telling her everything. Mine bit the dust, my battery won't charge again. So for the cross slope, we went up on a little adventure trip to be evaluating some alternatives for U.S. bike routes, and coming back into the state of Florida, it was a really, really hard rain, and shoulder cross slope and cross slope of the roadway itself was really pretty obvious how valuable it was here. So cross slope of the traveled way shall not be less than 0.015 feet or greater than 0.04 feet per foot. And so we'd really like you to be looking for that 2.02 feet per foot. And if you have a 3-lane section, 0.03 feet per foot. So be looking for cross slope, and realize this is a shall condition. Okay, so something that we're expecting you to analyze and follow. For shoulder width, the width of the outside shoulder for 2-lane, 2-way roadway shall not be less than the values in table 3.1. So another shall condition. For 2-lane roadways, that shoulder width is dependent on volume. And for multi-lane divided roadways, the shoulder width is dependent on the number of lanes. And then for paved outside shoulders, they're required for rural, high-speed, multi-lane facilities. All right.
Another question came in the chat, clarification on significant truck volume. What percentage, or is there a cutoff, any guidance? What does significant truck volume mean?
You know, that's a good question. We have not defined it, but I would think that it's going to be 10%, because I think that's the value that historically that we used in the plans preparation manual for truck volume. So probably to be thinking about 10%. Then I'm just going to write down these comments too, so that we can mark them and things that the Greenbook committee can work on. So truck volumes, define posted versus design speed. And, you know, the Greenbook is really big, and we're changing a lot, so there might be places where maybe what we've changed doesn't make sense with what we've had. And we always appreciate people letting us know when there's a part that's confusing, so that we can work on it and clarify it. So don't hesitate to ever send me an email where I've made a mistake or where I need to do more clarification. It actually helps me a lot, because I spend so much time on it that I sometimes don't always see these places where we need to make improvements. So for shoulder width, for flush shoulder roadways, a 2-lane, again, it's based upon the average daily traffic. And remember too, this is not a paved shoulder, this is just a shoulder. It could be grass, it might be gravel, it could be paved. And again, for this 2-lane area, and again for the multi-lanes, so the number of lanes are going to define your shoulder width, both outside and on the inside. And remember again, that is not necessarily paved. However, there is a part a little bit later in the Florida Greenbook where we talk to you about providing either bike lanes or paved shoulders on arterial and I think collectors, and that's a shall condition. And so if you've got to meet that criteria because of where your project is, it's in the urban area boundary, you would want to make sure that that shoulder is paved at least to 4 feet in width, so that you can provide a minimum facility to support the bicyclist. Okay. For shoulder cross slope, we showed this in table 3-12. If it's a paved shoulder, you want to have a cross slope of 2 to 6%. If it's a gravel or crushed rock, 4 to 6%, and it's turf, 6 to 8%. And this is just because of the difference in the materials and how well it's draining water away from the roadway. And 2, we don't want you to go out and do a lot of shoulder correction, you know, for existing roadways, because historically our criteria was less than or equal to 12%, but we do want you to be thinking about looking at lane departure crashes, and if you're having a lot of run off the road crashes and vehicles aren't recovering, maybe you need to think about correcting an excessive shoulder cross slope. For curb ramps, so I had kind of taken curb ramps out of my presentation because I thought it's been a law for so long. People know this and they're doing it. But lo and behold, I'm driving along Timberlane Road in Tallahassee, and here we have a brand new sidewalk that has no curb ramp. So I decided to put it back in. It's important that when you're doing and the reason there was no curb ramp is because the sidewalk did not continue on the other side of the intersection behind me. Since then, the county has continued the sidewalk project, and as a consequence of having not provided the curb ramp on this corner, they had to tear this all out. It was only 2 years old, and rebuild it, and it now has a beautiful curb ramp. So just remember that Florida statutes require you to build curb ramps at any point where a sidewalk would meet the street and there's a curb. And the Florida Greenbook requires it, ADA requires it, the Plans Preparation Manual and the FDM require it. So always put in your curb ramps, even if the sidewalk isn't yet continuing. One of the reasons for this is that a person who uses a wheelchair or a mobility device, they actually are allowed to travel in the roadway even if there is a sidewalk present. And a lot of this is because sometimes the condition of the sidewalk can be so poor. There might be constraints with utilities, or even the frequency of driveways might have such a significant cross slope that it just tips them too much. And so some people might choose to be in the street, and we always want to be able to give them the choice to be where they prefer to travel, and also to give them access to the street when the sidewalk ends. For median widths, they're defined as the horizontal distance between the inside edge of the travel lanes and of the opposing roadways. So, you know, it's this part right here. The minimum permitted median widths for multi-lane roadways and urban streets are given in Table 3-14. And so it's going to vary dependent on design speed, and it varies from 15.5 to 40 feet wide. And when design speeds are less than or equal to 40 miles an hour, 10-foot two-way left turn lanes or raised medians may be used. If you guys look at these pictures, the median, especially on the bottom picture on Main Street in Gainesville, would not meet the existing criteria in the Florida Greenbook for median width. They are too narrow. I think it might be 8 feet wide. It's 6 to 8 feet wide. And so one of the things we've always thought about is medians as a place to store a car, to separate traffic and to store a car that's waiting to make a turn. But medians have such an enormous value in providing safety and refuge for pedestrians in wanting to cross streets, especially when the crossing is a yield type condition. And so in the 2018 Florida Greenbook, we are adding a whole new section on islands and refuges so that when you can't meet the criteria for a median, you can still meet the criteria for islands and refuges, and we can encourage more of this channelization and improve pedestrian safety crossings. So be looking for that in the 2018. And it is in the 2011 AASHTO Greenbook. And so maybe what you might want to do is if you're going to be building something that wouldn't currently meet the median with criteria in the Greenbook, you want to, you know, write your design variation and defend that because of the fact that it's in the AASHTO Greenbook and that it has been so well shown to improve pedestrian safety. So So for median widths, you can see here 55 miles and over, that's a 40-foot median. Under 55, it's a 22-foot median. And in urban areas, the medians would go down to 19 and a half feet and 15 and a half feet. For roadside clear zone, this was actually, we were out on a quality assurance review, and we were in Waldo, I think. And there was a lot of discussion about, depending on at what point we measured the slope and the drop-off from, would cause this particular project to either pass or fail in meeting drop-off protection. And so that's why we've done a little bit of work to try to clarify what parts of the roadway are included in certain terms, and then where we measure things from. So if you're measuring clear zone and it's a flush shoulder roadway, you measure from the edge of the outside motor vehicle travel way. Okay, so be here, and then this edge right outside here. And then if it's a curb and gutter, you measure from the face of the curb. So you would measure from here. So the minimum permitted clear zone widths are given in Table 3-15. And in 2018, the term clear zone is kind of being sunsetted, and it's becoming lateral offset. And you'll see a lot of changes in the criteria for clear zone and lateral offset. And much of the stuff that's currently in Chapter 3, which is geometric design, is being moved to roadside design. So we're trying to have geometric design for those components that are within the roadway, and roadside design is for everything outside of the roadway. So for minimum widths of the clear zone, you can use this type of criteria. One of the things is that we still have this caveat in here for on objects where the 4-foot minimum offset cannot be reasonably obtained and other alternatives are deemed impractical, the minimum may be reduced to 1.5 feet. So we're trying to have criteria that can, has a real benefit in terms of improving highway safety, but yet still looks at the existing constraints, especially on curved roadways. So there might be trees, there might be utilities, there might be a bus shelter, there could be a lot of stuff that's behind that curve. So we're trying to write criteria that allows that to remain. So for roadside slopes, so the side slope adjacent to the shoulder of the roadway, it shall not be steeper than 1 to 3, but you can go up to 1 to but we prefer 1 to 4. So we're going to allow 1 to 3, prefer 1 to 4, and it should be flatter on the outside of horizontal curves, so that if a driver leaves the roadway, they have a better chance to recover. And then backslopes on ditches or cuts should not exceed 1 to 3 if within the clear zone. So 1 to 3 would be your maximum steepness, but we'd really prefer it to be 1 to 4. And when we're doing these quality assurance reviews, so Mary Lou is watching for traffic. Michael is seeing where Freddie went to, because Freddie's down here, and this was really very steep down here in the bushes. And then this is Belkis, and she's getting ready to help Freddie take the measurement. So we actually really do try to go out there and see how people are building roadways and whether or not they're following design criteria, especially related to the state highway system. Vertical clearance. So freeways and arterials, they shall have a vertical clearance of at least 16 feet and 6 inches. And then other streets and highways should have a clearance of 16 feet. So a little higher clearance on freeways and arterials because of the trucks. And then pedestrian or shared use path bridges require a minimum of 17 foot of clearance over roadways. And this is because they're not as robust, and it might be easier to take one of these bridges out or cause more serious harm. And so that's a little bit why the higher vertical clearance. And then for bridges over railroads, they require a minimum of 23 feet. And so this is kind of a double problem. You first got the clearance required over the roadway for this new pedestrian bridge on the Legacy Trail. And then you also have the vertical clearance within these features to continue to allow maintenance vehicles to safely pass through on the overpass itself, on the ped bike bridge. So for pedestrian facilities, this is again, one of the places where we now have shall conditions. So they shall be given full consideration in planning and development of transportation facilities and local programs. And shall doesn't, full consideration for us doesn't mean you're going to think about it. Consideration means actually doing it. So don't ponder whether or not you're going to do it. That's not what this means. You are going to do it, and you just figure out how to do it well. So it applies to construction, reconstruction, or other significant improvement. And then ADA requires that existing facilities to be accessible and address in alteration projects. Remember, that gets back to that maintenance and resurfacing, Chapter 10. And we want you to emphasize, give an emphasis to providing bicycle and pedestrian accommodation in or within 1 mile of the urban area. And that's just because we want you to be spending your resources in places where you would have the most dense activity and where you'd be able to help the most people. So pedestrian facilities, they include sidewalks, shared use paths, over and underpasses, curb ramps, median refuges, signals, and crosswalks. And the reason that they include shared use paths is because it's pretty rare that you would have both a sidewalk and a shared use path, so that one facility that exists needs to be accessible because it's going to be your pedestrian facility. Here's an example of the urban area maps. If you haven't ever looked at these are posted on DOT's website, and there's hot links within Greenbook to these maps, and you can pull them up by county. If your county isn't, doesn't have a hot link, it's because you don't have an urban area. These are defined by FHWA and based upon the most recent census. So this would be the 2010 census data, and they look at travel patterns and population density. The green area is your FHWA urban area boundary. This dashed area on the outside edge, that's that 1 mile buffer, and that's because Florida statutes requires that we give a priority to the urban area plus 1 mile, and so we've mapped this for you. So you would look, at your facility, and this would trigger whether or not you're in the shall condition for bike and ped facilities. And if you have a situation like this where this is US 27, it's in the area that requires bike and ped facilities, then falls out, and then starts again. Just be sensible here, and people are not going to evaporate when they enter this area that's outside the urban area boundary, and try to provide a consistent facility all the way through, especially, for those facilities that might be longer travel distances like bike facilities, okay? For sidewalks, historically there was a 4-foot minimum width in the Florida Greenbook for sidewalks, but ADA requires you to have the sidewalk be 5 feet wide every, I think it's 200 feet to allow 2 wheelchairs to pass each other. So, who's going to build 4 foot, 5 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot? So we've just gone with the straight 5 foot minimum width for a sidewalk, and then 6 feet of its back a curb, because we don't really want people walking right along the very edge of that curb. It's just too close to traffic, and you wouldn't want a bicyclist or a person using a wheelchair or some other device to accidentally roll off the edge. You do need a minimum of a 2-foot buffer strip if you're separated from the curb, and this is mostly just to give you a practical space for some grass to grow. Requires at least a 5-foot wide connection between an accessible transit stop and the sidewalk. And new sidewalks, they need to connect to existing sidewalks, shared use paths, and crosswalks on the adjoining project. So you've got to make sure you've got to make those connections, even if you have to adjust your project limits, okay? And then grades should not exceed 5% unless accessible ramps and landings are provided. And most people know this, but I just want to make sure to reiterate this, is that if you're within a constrained environment, such as the roadway right-of-way, your grade can match the general grade of the adjacent roadway. You are not required by ADA held to a 5% max. You just build your sidewalk so that it follows that profile grade, and you are fine in meeting ADA criteria. However, your cross slope shall not exceed 2%, and that is because of how it affects the wheelchair and how it would turn you constantly towards the downside of that slope. For bike facilities, again, you need a minimum of functional width of 4 feet. Remember when I told you that about the paved shoulders? And then if you've got a curb or a barrier wall or something else on-street parking, you need to then add another foot so that you have a buffer from that barrier and the bicycle space. So if the traffic exceeds 10%, so that's why back to what's considered significant. So here we're using 10%, so I would suggest that you use that again when we're looking at lane width. Posted speeds are greater than 50, or if you're between other types of vehicles, a through lane and a right turn lane, a bus or a parking lane, then your bike lane should be at least 5% or 5 feet. And remember, these are the minimums. You can make them bigger. You know, if you've got the space, make them bigger. Don't make them too big though, because we don't want a car to think it's a travel lane or even to know it's a bike lane and abuse it anyway. So think about what your size is and how it will function in your overall scheme of traffic. To be a bike lane, it needs to have the bike lane pavement markings. So use the bike lane symbol and the arrow and align with the longitudinal lines of the roadway. And existing drainage grates, inlets, utility covers, they should be evaluated and corrected if there are problems. And actually where you would go and look at this is in the drainage manual. There are some tables that give you some guidance on what are appropriate inlets and grates to be used when you're in proximity to bike or ped facilities. So that's all in the 2017 drainage manual. For roadway width, this goes back to what we talked about before, redistributing and reallocating your space. And so if you've got an existing project and you want to restripe, you can go to 10-foot through lanes, 9-foot turn lanes, 7-foot parking lanes. But remember, this 10-foot is really kind of restricted. And you would only use this when you have less than 10% of truck volumes. If you've got greater than, oh, this isn't our truck volume thing. Where's the thing? Yes. So if you have greater than 10% trucks, or you have a design speed of 40 miles an hour or greater, then your minimum through lane width, if you're going to be restriping, is going to be 11 feet. Okay? And if it's a two-way left turn lane, you know, where you're exposed to traffic on both sides, then your minimum width is 10 feet. And for parking, existing parking, you can measure 7 feet from the face of the curb and you can leave that. But if you're creating new parking somehow when you're restriping, then that parking should be 8 feet. For shared use paths, let's see, how are we doing? I'm going to go a little faster. So shared use paths, again, you're required to have the separation from the roadway, that horizontal space or barrier of at least 5 feet. And the problem is there's two things. If it's flush shoulder, we want to make sure that you're adequately separated from motorized vehicle traffic. And if it's a curb and gutter, we want to make sure that you're sufficiently separated from the curb so that the bicyclist doesn't, for some reason, leave the path, fall over the curb, and that's just not recoverable. It's very few bicyclists that could actually come off the curb and then bunny hop right back onto the curb and keep on going. So that is why. So there's two different things that we're trying to minimize as a potential crash. And so the bicyclist operating speed is 18 miles an hour. We already talked about the running grade and the cross slope. So you have this permission for the grade to match the slope of the roadway when you're constrained. And we want you to be looking at driveways and evaluate them for accessibility in terms of cross slope and correct if it's possible. And vertical clearance of anything above the shared use path, a minimum of 8 feet. For shared use paths, the most important thing is to not abuse traffic control devices. So don't put them in places where what you're really trying to say is be careful, pay attention. This intersection already has stop control on the side street. It's coming out into Franklin Boulevard in Tallahassee. So having a stop sign here just creates confusion and is actually in conflict with Florida law, which would require any driver coming out to yield to any traffic in the crosswalk and any driver turning in to yield to traffic in the crosswalk. So if these drivers are yielding and these drivers are yielding, but this poor person is being told to stop, it's just chaos. So what we want you to do is also think about appropriately sized stop signs, nothing up in the air, no 7-foot posts, so they're 4 to 5 feet above the grade of the path, and they're using the appropriate sizes of smaller signs. But in this situation, the sign wouldn't be here at all. And so we have a diagram in here now to help you with placing and designing your signage. And then for work zone safety, it's just really important to know that cyclists and pedestrians continue to travel through our work zones, and we're not always doing the best job of accommodating them. So this chapter has been rewritten to strengthen this. And if you are working in a project that involves a rail crossing, and if there is a sidewalk that approaches that rail crossing, you are now required to continue that sidewalk. That's a shall condition because you're never going to come back, and it's just part of your whole roadway upgrade. For design exceptions and variations, if it's not possible to meet the minimum standards, the designer shall obtain a design exception. So, and this is in the Greenbook now. This is chapter 14, but we're making a lot of changes to this. And you just are expected to make every effort to get the best possible alignment, grade, site distance, and drainage. But we want you to be consistent with terrain, local development, safety, and funding. Okay. And then for the 2018 version of this chapter, we had this new exhibit, so there'll be Exhibit 14A. It's your sample letter to submit to your maintaining agency for approval for the design exception or variation. And just remember, exceptions are based upon the AASHTO's new construction criteria and the criteria in the Florida Greenbook for the controlling elements. And then variations are whenever it is not a FHWA controlling element, but is a shall condition within the Greenbook. And so FHWA, when they revised their controlling criteria, there used to be 13, now there's 10. And so they're looking at design speed and lane width, shoulder width, horizontal curve radius, super elevation, stopping site distance, so remember that changed, and maximum grade, cross slope, vertical clearance, and design loading structural capacity. So these are for roadways greater than or equal to 50 miles an hour, design speed. And then for the low-speed roadways, this is the great part, is that the only two controlling criteria are now design speed and design loading structural capacity. And so this will all be published in the 2018 Greenbook. So sometimes people don't know what to write, or they just write on and on and on and on. And so what we've done is we've created an outline of what you need to include. And one of the big things to think about is safety performance. So we want you to be looking at crashes, and when you know that you're deviating from accepted design criteria, you look to see whether or not that deviation is causing a safety problem, and you would look at that through crash data. And this is where Becky's going to help me. So there's a couple of different places where this is. The first one is Signal 4 Analytics, and local governments can contact the Geoplant Center at FSU and ask for permission to access this database. But what it can do is just real quickly, this was 1 week of crashes in Pinellas and Hillsborough County. And you would get just a simple map like that that might call your attention to areas where you need to do further research. And then Becky's going to talk about, I'm going to move over, the Unified Base Map Repository.
Okay. A lot of the crash data is hosted on our Unified Base Map Repository, or the UBR as we call it. And to get there, your first site, when you get there, it'll look like this. And this is the link to get to this website. And what you do when you get here is you're going to log in. And once you hit that login, it's going to take you to this. Now, if you do not have an account, you're going to click the Create a New Subscriber Account. And then whenever you do that, make sure that there will be a drop-down box that includes your email domain. If that is not there, go ahead and hit the link that emails the UBR admins, which I am one of them. And if not, you can go ahead, if you already have an account, which is the same as any ISA account that you have, whether you have A+ or any other FDOT application, it is the same user ID and password for those applications. And so you're going to fill in your user ID, which includes your full email address. Even all the stuff after the @ symbol, that is your user ID and your password. And once you type all of that in, then that brings you to the home page that shows you all of the data sets that are available. And for the crash data, that would be these two bottom ones right here. And that provides you with shape files. But once you click on whichever one you're interested in, it will take you to the download page. And then again, because I had clicked on the crash rate GIS files, and once you get here, there are two things, and let's just say I only wanted to download this bottom one, so I click on the download link, and then it will download that file as a zip file for you. You can save it wherever you need to save it and open it from there. Now, if you are going to download any of the Nav Streets data, you will be, or the Strava or Nav Streets, you will be required to accept a license agreement. And once you do that, then it will take you to the download page. And that's all there is to it. And if you have any questions at any point, you can email any of the UBR admins. There's links everywhere to get to us. Just send an email. And somebody will respond usually the same day.
It'll probably be Becky, because she responded to me in about 10 minutes when I couldn't get in. So
yes.
So great, thank you. And I even changed your slides a little bit, and you went right through that. That's good. Okay. The other thing is that the safety office is creating GIS shape files for crash data that you also can access. And so these are the links. So if you downloaded the PowerPoint, these would be hot links to get you to DOT's online GIS crash data that you can also download. So without signing in. And so one of the things that we want you to do is we want you to make informed decisions, and we're hoping that as DOT goes through the effort of better thinking about the data we collect and how we organize it, that we're also making it available to you so that you're spending more of your time thinking about how to make a better project and not so much time redoing the work that we've also done. So hopefully that will just make your lives a little easier and you'll make better decisions. And then just as a heads up for what we're going to be changing for our 2018 edition, I've already mentioned a couple places, but this year the Greenbook Committee is working on geometric design still. We're going to be going through and updating the kind of, I guess, less significant tables and figures to make sure that we're always consistent with at least AASHTO's 2011 Greenbook. We're also going to be trying to add more information on the design of roundabouts. For lighting, one of the big things has been decorative lighting for bridges, so the lighting subcommittee has agreed to take that on. And there's an interest in whether or not we should be adjusting illumination values depending upon the type of light, because LEDs tend to hold their light and don't diminish as quickly as the high pressure sodiums. And then vertical illumination values, so we can have better guidance for designing for pedestrian crossings, especially mid-block crossings. For signing and marking, probably the big thing is the department has just adopted a new speed zoning manual. And what's most important about this is the guidance for how to sign and mark school crossings. That manual became effective July 30th. And so it's important for you guys to access that speed zoning manual and I think Alan, I saw that in the list of webinars, Alan Al-Yerfali is going to be giving a talk about this in a month or so. But just to know that the criteria for how you sign and mark school zone is changing. We're no longer using the indexes in the design standards, but instead we're using these figures in Chapter 15 of the speed zoning manual. For traditional neighborhood design, one of the things, this is kind of where our more complete streets type language has always been. And so what we're looking at is the chapters that affect complete streets that are in the Florida Greenbook, and to ensure that we've got design criteria in there that will help support your efforts to create complete streets and won't be a barrier to implementation. And you'll see that where we've already adjusted lane widths and speeds so that you can design narrower, slower streets, especially for neighborhoods and business districts. And then for drainage, there's been some changes for like where these tables for preferred inlet types are when you're close to bike and pet facilities, but also ways that stormwater is managed and treated. And we also are looking at hopefully adding some criteria for having more green streets where stormwater can be managed at least to some extent within the highway right-of-way before it goes off to other places. And so looking at what's happening here in Tallahassee, Philadelphia, Denver have done some really cool things with green streets. And then, so it's 11:30. If there are any questions, and I think, Anthony, that you had some more poll questions.
Oh, yes. The poll questions, I guess we can bring up here. Give me a second to get back to my window. While people think about the questions that they may have to write into the chat window. So we have new editions of the Greenbook are announced via FDOT's contact mailer database. Just a quick little poll here if you are registered to receive these updates. And I guess a follow-up, Marianne, for those that are not registered, where they would go to be registered would be helpful if they are interested.
Okay.
Right. So 30% of the audience, 70% is not.
Ooh, okay. So this is, we are trying to get away from, we can't know you all. Well, we'd like to, but we don't. And so if you will go to the Florida Greenbook webpage, the link that I gave you earlier, you would be able to see there is a link there, both on the webpage and within the Greenbook itself, encouraging you to go to our contact management database, and then you can self-subscribe for any of the areas of interest that you might have. So you could subscribe for the FDOT design manual, the design standards, for construction memos, for information on the local agency program. And that way then you will get targeted emails telling you when we have changed something, because you kind of have a responsibility to stay current, and you can fulfill that responsibility by subscribing to the contact management database, and we will only send you emails that are important. So.
Great. We have another poll question asking what you have used the Greenbook for in the past. Have you designed local roads? Have you designed state roads? Or have you worked in the design of local agency program agreement under the LAT program? And this is a check all that applies, so you're able to, it's not a choose one. It's looking right now like Oh yeah, you're seeing the responses. Yeah, we've got 80% designing local roads, 25% designing state roads, 30% designing projects on their lap.
Yeah. So for all of you who said that you're using the Greenbook to design local roads, that is exactly right. Don't be using the Greenbook to design state roads. You've got to be using the Plans Preparation Manual, the Design Standards, and now the FDOT Design Manual. So just remember, Greenbook doesn't apply to state roads. And then for your LAP projects, remember to go to that chart that's in the LAP manual in Chapter 19 and look at the elements of your project and then select the appropriate design manual that you should be following. So these are good.
One more poll question. This is the first Q&A session, I believe, Marianne, where it's actually the speaker asking the audience questions. This is actually kind of interesting. So we have one more. Go ahead.
We are always trying to figure out how to better inform you of the work that we're doing. And so I love this. I mean, these are really good. So.
Yeah, this is fun. So the question here is, have you attended training on the Florida Greenbook before today? Check all that apply. Design Expo, Lab Construction Checklist Training, FDOT Design Update Training, or other.
Okay. They're rolling in. A lot of people go to Design Expo, don't they? There was 2,000 people at Design Expo this year, and I'm always impressed when I have people in my session. So if you came, it always makes me feel better, especially when I have that slot that's just before lunch on the last day. So one of the things, I see only 8% coming to the LAP construction checklist training, and I just wanted to encourage you. We're using this LAP outreach as a method to train all local governments. So even if you don't have a LAP project, or even if you're not so interested in the construction checklist, which is basically your specifications package and your LAP program agreement, we are giving 2 hours of Greenbook in the morning at the start of all those LAP training sessions, and you are welcome to come sit in on the Greenbook training and leave if you want to just get a quick update on where we're going. And you can find these trainings by just going to the LAP program page on FDOT's website. So, and we're going to be doing a lot of training related to LAP and ADA applies to all projects. In the next few weeks, Lorraine and Dean are giving those, and then in spring, Lorraine and I will be giving some training together with Carrie Shepard from Federal Highway. So look for those on the LAP program webpage. Okay.
So we have we've got a few questions. Just Richard, someone asked a question about AICP credits and not being able to get to the APA website. Dennis and I will follow up with you via email for that, to kind of troubleshoot your specific questions on that. There was another kind of follow-up on the design speed, and that was a bit of a controversial topic while we were going through the webinar. But what are your thoughts on adjustments of posted speeds several years after construction? Because it does say thou shall not post design speed above, the posted speed above the design speed, based on speed studies, 85th percentile speed. What are the implications of posting above the design speed limit?
Well, this was controversial in the Greenbook committee meetings too, because there are some of the more rural counties who have been doing this for some time, it seems, and that is why if you go back and look 2013, 2011, I didn't go back and see how far, but it's been very old language in there that you should not do that. So you certainly should not continue to do that, and you should resolve it, with especially in your next project, because that would trigger, again, this responsibility to review that and harmonize it. It is not okay. So, You know, and this is my own personal view now, but when we are one of the leading states in traffic crashes, I just don't think it's okay to always let the driver decide how fast people should go. It just doesn't seem to work that well because some people make bad decisions. So you have to use your knowledge and expertise there. So anyway, some people might disagree with that, but if you're driving behind me, you're going to be going the speed limit. So.
Question about lane widths. The lane widths in the Greenbook, are they consistent with the design manual for freeways?
The design manual for freeways. I don't know what manual that is. So they're going to be consistent with the 2011 AASHTO Greenbook. They're definitely consistent with the AASHTO Greenbook. But I don't know that.
Highway design manual.
You know something? I think in this whole discussion, one of the things is at the point that a local government might actually be designing a true freeway, they are going to choose to follow the criteria in the plans preparation manual and in the FDM. And so part of it that we might think about is actually just, I think right now I've got a row in there for values for freeways, and we might, that's already a really complex table, and we might modify that table and just tell you at that point to go to the FDM and to use the criteria there. So.
Okay. Question about the map that you showed of the urban boundaries. Is that the same as the county urban service areas, or are these these are different?
They're different. They're really based upon FHWA's travel data and the most current census. They are not the same as urban service area maps because those really relate to the provision of utilities, sewer, and not the same as travel data, which is what our urban area boundary maps are based on.
And again, the link to those maps are in the presentation itself. So the links to any of the web page, because there was a question about, hey, can you tell me that link again? The links are on the presentation. The presentation is already posted on the Tampa Bay Traffic Safety site. So follow your hyperlink in the email that got you to this webinar in the first place, or in the chat or in the pod for GoToWebinar. I also uploaded the presentation there as a handout, so you're able to download it from that location as well. Marianne did a good job of having the webinars or all of the hyperlinks in the webinar.
And they're also, you know, if you go into the Greenbook, they're on FDOT's roadway design webpage. When you look for documents and publications, they are hyperlinked within the Greenbook itself, both in the definitions and in the pedestrian and bicycle chapters. So there's a lot of paths to follow, and you'll get to them.
One more question. Is it required to design collector roads based on PPM standards?
Only if it's a state highway. If it's a local highway, then you would design it to Florida Greenbook criteria.
Yeah, so the collector arterial, those classifications don't matter. It's only local roads, Greenbook, state highway, PPM. That's basically the
yeah. You know, that is an interesting thing. We had that one table where we showed arterial collectors local, and I think we're using local in two different ways. And maybe what we need to say is the Greenbook applies to roadways off the state highway system, and those roadways off the state highway system are generally classified as arterials, collectors, and local. It's just the volume of traffic and the speed of traffic they're designed for.
Yeah.
So maybe that would help clarify that.
Yeah, because local, it seems to be used in more than one way. You're right.
Yeah. So off the safe harbor system, use the Greenbook unless you have federal funding and your project has a complexity or cost that would trigger you to use the PPM. And make sure you look at Lorraine's table in the LAP manual. Because we kind of are, for LAP projects, we are expecting you to know what design criteria to follow and to be thinking about that when you're scoping your project.
I had a question. You've talked about the subcommittee and the changes that are coming to the 2018, and there's different groups and people. What if somebody is interested in getting involved in any of those? Is there opportunity to in the upcoming changes to provide feedback? How does that work?
Well, we are always interested in having feedback from users, and there is a couple people who actually read every darn word and call me or email me when they find something that doesn't make sense. In terms of the Greenbook, so we always appreciate those. For the Greenbook committee itself, membership is actually established by statute. Those were those 4 categories I showed you early on. You're appointed by the secretary based upon a recommendation from the district design engineer, because they know the engineers who are working in the area and know who are good leaders and would be good members. In terms of other people who want to be involved, we do have, in areas that we don't ourselves have the subject matter expertise, we do have technical experts. So those would be areas like, we don't have a lot of rail. Especially in quiet zones. We developed criteria for quiet zones in this last round of the Greenbook. So we brought in our coworkers from District 5 who were working on Sunrail, and we got expertise from some of the local governments who were working on reviewing quiet zones. So usually what we're doing is we're trying to fill a gap in our expertise. All of our meetings are held in the public domain. So especially if you wanted to attend our in-person Greenbook meeting, it'll be at the Turnpike headquarters in Ocoee in the end of March in 2018. And we always publish that both on our own webpage and through the Florida Administrative Register. And then, so those are the areas where we can best use, public input and participation. But I'm a little cautious of expanding our subcommittees to the point where they are so big they cease to function. Because we have an hour to an hour and a half to work through stuff. But if there's a particular interest, if someone just contacts me, I can help guide them in how they might be able to participate. The best thing is to use the manual and tell us where we need to improve it. That's users using the manual is what is driving us to make all these changes. So hopefully that helps.
No, yeah, that's great. There's no other questions in the chat. Just wanted to pass along to you. I don't know if you're looking at the chat pod, but there's a kudos to you saying this was one of the best webinars I've attended. The information was clear and easily applicable. So great job today. This was just a good webinar.
Marianne,
that's a very nice person.
I want to tell you, very good.
Okay, well, I really appreciate having Becky's help because I knew I was over my head with that base map thing. So
we appreciate it. We know it's a lot of effort on your end to put this together, so we appreciate. Yeah, if there's no other questions in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and we'll stay on the line for a few minutes if anything else comes up. Thank you, everyone, for attending.